Hey, this is Driver88. So you're in Australia and you're considering a muscle slash sports car. You've got a few dollars in your pocket and you're looking for something relatively special, probably a V8. You might be looking at a W205C63 or maybe the new Mustang Dark Horse. If you're probably completely crazy, you might consider the ZL1 Camaro, and that is a car that I have not driven at all before, and our friends at Dutton One have one in stock, so we're going to drive one today and see if it's worth buying. Now, what do we think of the looks of the ZL1? I personally think that this car looks incredible. Maybe it's because I don't see a lot of muscle cars here in Melbourne, Australia, but particularly from the front, the 6th generation ZL1 looks really menacing. Good looking car from the front and back. I think it's one of the best looking Camaro generations of all of them, maybe compared to the first generation, which there is a really incredible example here as well, which looks just as menacing in black. Really good looking car. I love it. Now the performance, we have a V8 LT4 up ahead of us, and it sits relatively far back from the front axle, an incredible 650 horsepower, 881 newton meters to the rear wheels, of which of course we have thankfully a proper diff and 305 section tires, which we're going to need. You'll also probably want to put some really good tires like PS4s or 5s or even Cup 2s or something on the back of these. I would not be messing around with any cheap tires on the front and rear of this car. Speaking of the front, we have enormous 275 section front tires. 0 to 100 is supposed to be in 3.5 and quarter mile is supposed to be at 11.4, but I tell you, I would not be expecting that to be possible that easily with this car unless the tires are warm and you're on a perfect surface. But that's not what the performance of this car is about. Really, this is more of a track focused car from the get-go. This achieved a 7 minutes 29 seconds on the Nürburgring, which is really quite impressive, compares to an M4 competition. If you add the 1LE pack with suspension and aero etc. bits, that car got the equal time relatively to a GT4 RS and an M4 CSL. So this is not just some ham-fisted sledgehammer. With the right setup and the right tires that are warm, this can really take corners, and I'm really interested to see how it feels on road, which we're going to do right now. Let's take it for a drive and also see how she sounds. So let's talk about the price. Well, back in 2018-19, Aussie muscle car fans absolutely scoffed at 160,000 Australian dollars before on-roads and options for the ZL1. Fast forward 5 years and it doesn't really seem massively expensive when you consider the fact that a new M4 competition or a new C63 coupe now costs over $200,000 sticker price. Currently there are 21 cars for sale. Half of those are manual, half of those are 10-speed auto, and I would probably recommend looking at the manual to maximize your driver experience, and they've pretty much held their money since that time. There's a half decent amount of cars there on car sales at the moment with relatively low kilometers, and I don't think you're getting a particularly bad deal considering the fact that this has a 6.2 litre supercharged V8 as opposed to a 4 or 6 cylinder engines in those cars that don't really sound that great. Welcome to the interior of the Camaro ZL1. Now, there's a few things that I really like about this interior. The first being one of the most important, it's the steering wheel. Alcantara feels quite nice. Not everyone likes Alcantara, I don't mind it. It's nice and thin, this steering wheel. It feels really, really good in the hands. The paddles, they kind of feel maybe not that premium. The action is nice, but they feel a bit plasticky. The rest of the interior is very much like a 15-16 kind of generation Chevrolet. There's some nice parts, some parts that are a bit plasticky, some bits that are a little bit creaky, but other parts feel quite solid. Door handles feel nice, etc. These seats, now, I really like the side bolstering. I like these seats. They feel relatively comfortable, but they're keeping me upright and they're keeping me in place for my body shape, so I like those. Yeah, so it's a bit of a mixed bag here. The screens, well, I mean, look, I don't think is kind of a big part of why you would buy this or not. It's all about how it drives, which we're going to do in just a second. So let's start it up. A nice rumble from the LT4. A lot of people these days love these analog dials, which are now kind of disappearing from all brands and models out there. Just a couple more notes on the interior. These buttons do feel quite cheap. Although that's not really going to be the major focus, I guess, for a muscle car. The other thing is I don't really have a place to put my mobile phone. I'm not really sure why, but I'm sure that there's some third-party holders that could fit in the Camaro. So a quick history lesson with the ZL1 here in Australia. So they only sold these here for about 2 years or so there's not a lot of them on the market, and they've been converted to right-hand drive here in Australia by GM Special Vehicles. And look, I don't think I really notice anything to be off here. So my driving position is really pretty much perfect. Even though I have only a pillbox to look out the front and rear, visibility is quite good. I'm not noticing anything off in terms of all the switchgear and the quality of the interior to be anything other than what would be a standard production vehicle. Sadly though, I don't think they sold a lot of them, and they don't sell them anymore, of course. And we don't even know if we're getting a 7th generation Camaro. Chances are we're not, given that the Corvette is selling quite well and that car is being developed into the future. Now, if you are after the proper muscle car experience, I probably would go with the manual gearbox. The down changes just aren't massively satisfying in this car. Even though this is supposed to be the sort of track-focused Camaro, it does feel a little bit wallowy, even in the sport mode. There's sort of just this kind of delay with everything you do, but I guess that's just part of driving a muscle car, right? It's certainly not scalpel sharp, but it's kind of part of the charm, having to work with the weight of the thing. Could you daily drive this car? Well, I wouldn't see why not. It's not particularly hard to get in and out of. We do have a tour mode, which I'm in right now, to soften everything up, including the magnetic ride suspension. And I'm glad that it has a tour mode, because on our crappy Australian roads, which are really not that great, you would want to have a tour mode to soak up some of these bumps and undulations, which are commonplace driving around here. Once you put things into sport mode, it really gets quite stiff, and some owners have upgraded their suspension to the 1LE package, which then gets almost unbearable to be a daily driver. It really should be on the track or perfectly smooth tarmac. So this 10-speed auto, I believe, developed with GM and Ford together. I've driven it in the Mustang GT, and I wasn't a massive fan of it in that car. It seemed to hunt around for gears. The enormous amount of torque and performance on display here kind of just takes over the whole experience. So I don't find myself reaching for the paddles that much. It's not massively satisfying to change gears. It's definitely not slow though. It's not slow to change gears. It's not up there with a dual clutch. Oh my goodness, okay. Someone just tried to cut in front of me, but anyway, that's fine. There's a huge amount of drama driving this thing just in everyday traffic. I think as a weekend warrior, a part-time track car, it's going to really excite you. There's not much in the sports car range now that has I don't think anything here in Australia, a supercharged V8 with this much power in a coupe format. And that's why I think the prices have sort of stayed up where they are and not massively depreciated like some other Euros or other sports cars. Into track mode now, and I can say that this car gives me sweaty palms. I mean, the progression of performance is awesome. It's got a really long throw accelerator, which I'm not a big fan of. The brakes though do feel quite up to the job. We're looking at 1750 kilos. I mean, this thing is a monster. It's an absolute monster of a car. People scoff maybe at the price of these things, but as a new sports car, I mean, the Euros aren't making anything this exciting, I think, for this sort of money. So a quick verdict on the ZL1 Camaro. Now, these things, there's not many of them in Australia, which has kept the price up. But I think if you are looking at one of these cars, the muscle car aesthetic and sound of this supercharged V8 are kind of going to already sell themselves before you even drive the thing. The steering is incredibly heavy, even in everyday conditions. The performance is incredible. I personally would go with a manual car. What I would also do is maybe even wait till a C8 Corvette here in Australia reaches a price which is far closer to this, and then take one of those for a spin as well. All right, guys, very interesting car. Almost enticing for me, but I'd love to also take a C8 Corvette to compare once they depreciate as well. This is Driver 88, and we'll see you next time.